Welcome to SEWP, the story behind the Trailblazing GWAC Powerhouse, a podcast brought to you by Presidio Federal and IBM. I'm your host, George Jackson with GovExec. On today's episode, I'll be joined by Joanne Woytek, SEWP Program Director at NASA, to discuss the evolution of the contract, its uses, and how SEWP is poised to evolve in the next 5 years. Joanne, always a pleasure. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So for the uninitiated, introduce yourself, your role, your journey through this wonderful public sector.
Yes, I'm Joanne Woytek. I'm going to be reaching my 47th year at NASA in December. Spent about half of it in the technical arena. Got sort of dragged into being a program manager of a little program called SEWP, and that is a government-wide acquisition contract vehicle, and the first of those, and have happily been the program manager / director since 1999.
As far as government tenures, that is a fair amount of time. So give me a historical perspective for this next question. How have public sector leaders used SEWP? How has that changed over time? How are folks using it today in ways they haven't before?
Well, SEWP has been going on now since 1993, so we're in the 30s plus years, and every iteration, we're heading into our 6th iteration, every iteration brings with it changes. I remember the first SEWP, we wanted to have 8 standalone single award contracts that could just go directly to and no competition and all this sort of fun stuff. And now we are very much into multi-award arena. It was much more oriented towards manufacturers of computer systems. It was called differently. It was called the Scientific Engineering Workstation Procurement. Around SEWP 3, we realized multi-award and service-oriented, solution-oriented offerings were needed, and we need to expand the scope. So that occurred as we moved into SEWP 4. On SEWP 5, we greatly expanded the scope into full solutions. Therefore, the name changed to Solutions for Enterprise-Wide Procurement to match the fact that it's not about any particular type of technology, but all information technology, communications, and audiovisual solutions, products, and product-based services are available through these contracts. As we've grown, our usage has grown. From the very first day in 93, when we started SEWP, we were in immediate success, at least at that level, which meant hundreds of millions of dollars. We are now a slightly bigger success at over $12 billion a year. So definitely a growth. Every government agency uses us. So we have to be ready and able to help the government in all ways possible.
Let me pull on the technological aspect of your answer there a bit. How have you seen the technologies evolve? Emerging technology is a huge focus all across public sector. You can't turn around without running into a conversation on artificial intelligence, for example, right now, Joanne. Give me a sense of how emerging technology is aligned with SEWP and SEWP's objectives.
SEWP has always been a very flexible and agile solution. Back in the early days, we had a cubbyhole. Contract holders would pass pieces of paper to every month that we would refresh our technology on. So back then, it was a 30-day technology refreshment process. Anything within the scope of the original contracts were in scope. We now do them every day electronically within an hour or less if when a requirement comes in. So every new technology required is available through the contracts because we've set them up to be that flexible. We understand the technology doesn't stand still. So there are some things we have not allowed for purposes in terms of the definition of what we created at the beginning of a SEWP iteration. For example, in SEWP 5, we did not allow drones, but that's not because of technology issue. It's a concern of making sure we weren't doing weapons. We fixed that in SEWP 6, for example. That's a known update. So as we see little things we have to change, but for the most part, the definition of SEWP has always been all IT, wherever IT is at. So it doesn't have to wait to or define it all in advance. We shift as technology shifts. We allow additions to all technology that fits within the general scope of the contracts. So everything that can be there is there.
What about the latest iteration of SEWP? How is it kind of complementing some of those trends?
So in terms of the upcoming one, I can't say much, but there's some well-known facts. The SEWP 6 RFP and publicly known that we now have 3 categories. We expanded upon the services to be allowed within the contracts to include all of IT services. Up through SEWP V, we focused on product-based services, which are a fairly large number of services, but we've now taken away even that to allow for all of the services within, again, IT, communications, or audiovisual. So the full suite of solutions will be available through the next iteration of SEWP. The current iteration is fairly wide open also, but it does have some limitations, like it's from fixed price, and the solutions have to be product-based.
Service-oriented, it's not a new mindset, obviously, for public sector, but with, executive orders around CX, a lot of new guidance for agencies and organizations. What role does that play in SEWP's DNA? How is SEWP becoming more service-oriented, Joanne?
Well, I would suggest that the rest of the government is trying to catch up with us. Since the start of SEWP, that has been one of our major features. The culture of the program, back when it was even a smaller program, was customer orientation. My role has always been one of a visionary or futurist in terms of what types of customer service we can provide, always looking for new ways of doing so. And then we find that eventually people catch up with us and we keep moving ahead. We are, for example, working on a whole new interface to our customers. Some of it will be similar, but I'm actually pushing for a brand new look and feel for how we provide information to customers, spending a lot of time trying to understand that in ways that we're finding not many people are thinking yet, but I think they need to. There's so much information out there. How do we make it easily findable and usable to our customers? We do that now, even in simpler ways. Speaking of other parts of the government, we have a FedRAMP page. Now, there was a FedRAMP site, and it's great. It's everything you want to have, but it's so hard to find what you want. We have a very simple one-page summary and easily findable and clickable. It's tied to the official page. So we try to look at ways, okay, there's lots of information there, but how can we make our customers more comfortable in finding what they need to find without having to know all the lingo and ins and outs? What do we need to provide them? So we're always searching for ways to do that. And then our customer service team, our outreach team, our team that works with the CIOs, the CXOs, the teams that work with the CHARM, the contract holders, the teams that work with industry. We have teams set up throughout to continue to look at how we can improve that. And we are now we have started discussions adding an even new layer that's even more oriented towards that middle stack between super knowledgeable help and the basic help. So we're going to keep improving in that direction too. So it's an ever evolving, but we feel that's one of our big strengths is that customer service.
Stepping back, the term customer can apply to any number of groups. It can apply to individual stakeholders and employees, the agencies that you serve, the contracting community. Joanne, am I reading it right that your customer base is all of the above?
Yes, and industry and contract holders. We sort of have different teams, although I don't want to sound like they're segregated. They all work together, but we have a team for industry, a team for contract holders, a team for the executive level, a team for agencies. We call them liaisons. We have the basic customer service team to answer the basic questions. So we match where our customers are at and continue to grow in what we're providing. And as I mentioned, we are actually looking at the next layer of adding even more customer service to that kind of middle layer of, I know what I want to do, but how can I get more information and how can we support them in a broader way? My go-to statement to our staff is we are the best in class, not a best in class, and we want to be the worldwide leader in what we do.
We've talked a little bit about emerging tech, but Joanne, I'd love to get your advice, maybe some best practices for our audience for how they can begin to prepare their workforces to best leverage these new and emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud computing, for example. How should they set themselves up for success?
Well, I would say first, understand what the technology really is versus what it's being said to be. Much of the hype that goes on with any of those terminologies is not relevant to the actual technology. You're talking to somebody who comes from the technical world, so for better or worse, I understand what some of those terms mean. And I find that the biggest problem is that people tend to overreact to them. Like, well, we have to get this. We have to get cloud. You have to be 100% cloud, or we have to have blockchain, or we have to have AI. Why? What is it? Do you understand what it does? Do you understand what the purpose is? Just because it's an emerging technology does not make it worthwhile or even different necessarily. There are always new technologies that work with the people who know what they're talking about in your team. A quick story about a storage solution in the emerging technology world. I once had a CIO tell a NASA expert on storage technology, "Oh, you're wrong. The salesperson says this, and so you have to make it work." And the storage technology person, who's the expert in the world, said, "No, I'm the expert." And and the CIO just kind of ignored that. But that always stuck with me. Don't take technology without the technology people that really know what they're talking about first, and then apply it in the best way possible. Don't just jump on it because it sounds good. Jump on it because it solves a problem.
I'm going to ask you to lean into that technological background, Joanne, and I'm going to choose to view it in a glasses half full fashion. It's definitely a good thing. So put on your futurist hat here for me and let me know where SEWP is going to be 5 to 10 years from now. What's the future look like?
Well, I sort of mentioned the one thing that I'm really pushing, which is the information question. SEWP is, in essence, an information hub. We provide information, which is contract and technological information, not that we know, but from industry to government and government requirements to industry. We are that central area. We have so much information. How do we make that work? How do we make it in a way that is different from what we have been doing in the past? My feeling is that in the past 30 years, the web has not changed much. The interface that we use today when we go to a web page is pretty much the same it was 20 some years ago. And I think it needs to change. And I am pushing us to do some research in that area, to learn how to be more visual in the approach, to utilize more considerations of maybe studies out there psychologically of how do people learn? How do people actually react to information? Is it really good to just be scrolling around trying to find things? Is that the best way to find information? There must be better ways. There must be better ways to show a person where they're going and have them go to the right place on your page without them having to know all the details that may be hidden in the background. So I'm hoping that that's one of my lasting pieces as I reach the end of my career. I'm really setting us up to do that as we move over the next 5 years and making that experience for the customer brand new and also better suited for where they're coming from.
Joanne, help me help you with this next question. For those private sector partners who want to participate in the SEWP program, what do you wish they would know? What do you wish they would do? What actions do they need to take before reaching out to you or your organization?
Well, they can actually always reach out to us because we have an industry team. So we're happy to work with industry. Don't reach out to me, please. I will just send you to the industry team because that's the team that the staff comes from industry. That's what we hire from so that we have people who are knowledgeable. I have never worked in industry, so better to talk to them. But the basic point that people have to understand, one of the big differences between us and, for example, the GSA schedules, we operate in a model where there are a few contract holders in SEWP V, 140, but we have access to 10,000 companies and we add 5 new companies every day to these contracts. So when somebody comes to us and says, I don't know if I can be a part of SEWP, do you have something in the scope of our contracts? Then you can go work with our contract holders and be added. How do you do that? Contact us. We'll help you understand the process. Very easy process. That's why we're able to add so many. I'm still amazed that there's still 5 a day that can come in. But there seem to be lots of companies out there doing little pieces now. Of course, we have all the big companies, but to be at 10,000 providers is pretty amazing. And we're happy to see that. But that model is different than I want a contract. You don't get a contract as a provider, but you provide your services, your solutions, your technology through the existing contracts. That's the best way to be a part of SEWP if you are a company who makes something. If you want to actually have a contract, the opportunity is out there for the next 60 days or so. I forget how long what the date is for the end of the RFP. The RFP is out for SEWP VI, and you go to the SEWP VI website, available off the SEWP website, or to stam.gov and just search for SEWP VI and obtain whatever information, all the information there, including the RFP and what are the qualifications required and how to then submit a proposal. So all that information is available. It is one of those few times in every 10 years where there is an opportunity to apply to send in a proposal.
Joanne, I'm going to close with a curiosity question. Before starting in the public sector media landscape about 12 years ago, the rubber ducky for me was most closely tied to Bert and Ernie. And now it's most closely tied to NASA SEWP. For the uninitiated, it's basically your mascot. How did that come about? How did you get aligned with the rubber ducky?
Back in 1992, when SEWP was first conceived by the three godfathers of SEWP, I call them, they came up with the SEWP acronym pretty quickly in a bowl of soup. It was actually the first logo we have. And then one of the three of them said, oh, this will be as easy as duck soup. And shortly thereafter, the bowl of soup included little claws sticking out from the soup. And then eventually a rather desultory looking duck sitting in the bowl. And it just grew from there. It was an unplanned and very, as you mentioned, very now well-known mascot for our contracts. And it's been a fun piece. It makes it us from being too serious.
Well, as we know from this conversation alone, it's not as easy as duck soup. Joanne Woytek, SEWP Program Director at NASA. Always a pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
SEWP, the story behind the trailblazing GWAC Powerhouse, was written and produced by Presidio Federal, IBM, and GovExec's Studio 2G. Mixing and sound design by Tessa Hall. A special thanks to Joanne Woytek of NASA. To learn more about how Presidio Federal and IBM serve as strategic partners, please visit presidiofederal.com/IBM. I'm GovExec's George Jackson. Have a great day.